Literature Review, Blended Learning in Distance Education by Stacy Wall. To discuss blended learning in distance education, we must first define both blended learning and distance education. Horn and Staker with InnoSight Institute define blended learning as formal education program in which a student learns at least in part through online delivery of content and instruction with some sort of element of student control over time, place, path, and/or pace, at least in part a supervised brick-and-mortar location away from home. Schlosser and Simonson define distance education as institution-based formal education where the learning group is separated and where interactive telecommunication systems are used to connect learners, resources, and instructors. There is one main contradicting idea in these definitions implying the blended learning instructional method cannot be used in conjunction with distance education. Distance education states learners and instructors are in separate locations, whereas the definition of blended learning implies students are in the traditional classroom setting. Blended learning transitions away from the traditional teacher-centered instruction to student-centered learning, similar to online learning, where students have more control over their own learning. Effective distance education is completed online and also student-centered. Thus, it is possible for blended learning to be used in conjunction with distance education. Learners gaining control over their learning in the traditional classroom setting is easily accomplished with content, instruction, and resources being placed online. A learning management system, otherwise known as an LMS, is now a commodity in an online instructional setting. Gearing instruction with student-centered learning instructional strategies is another facet of blended learning and increasing student engagement. Teachers participating in student learning programs reported higher student engagement. Both blended learning and distance education learning are disruptive innovations in the education field. Online learning has been a disruptive innovation in the education system as an asset for learners to gain information, which is sometimes less expensive and more accessible than traditional brick-and-mortar classroom. One might say online learning will soon no longer be considered disruptive innovation as it is quickly becoming a norm in instructional settings. In conclusion, blended learning can be used in conjunction with distance education and can increase learning. Teachers are using instructional strategies to give students more control over pace, path, time, and place to increase their engagement and facilitate differentiation among their students. Lastly, distance education instructors who incorporate some element of face-to-face interaction with their students are likely to see an increase in student engagement, resulting in more learning.